Commander Amara Blake stepped off the transport jeep at the Naval Special Warfare Training Facility, expecting a routine evaluation assignment, but Admiral Richard Hawkins had other plans. Standing before a crowd of elite operators, he decided to make her the punchline of his opening ceremony. The laughter echoed as recruits whispered she was just another quota pick destined to wash out, and when the Admiral casually asked about her call sign, as a joke, he expected her to stumble to prove every doubt they had about her. But there was one thing none of them knew about Commander Blake. They had unwittingly mocked a woman who had sealed herself inside a contaminated bunker for 72 hours to save thousands of ghosts from a program so classified her sacrifices had been erased from history. And today, when the Admiral finally learned the truth behind those two words, Shadowblade, he was going to collapse under the weight of everything he thought he knew. Just before we get back to it, I'd love to know where you're watching from today, and if you're enjoying these stories, make sure you're subscribed. The morning sun beat down on the Naval Special Warfare Training Facility in Coronado, turning the concrete into a shimmering grid of heat. Admiral Richard Hawkins stood on the observation deck, his pressed uniform crisp despite the California warmth, surveying the crowd of officers and recruits gathered for the quarterly command evaluation ceremony. His weathered face carried the confidence of a man who'd spent 30 years earning every ribbon on his chest. "Ladies and gentlemen," Hawkins began, his voice amplified across the courtyard. "Today we welcome a mystery officer to our Elite SEAL Command Evaluation Unit." He paused for effect, letting a chuckle escape. "Let's hope our new addition can keep up with the best of the best." Scattered laughter rippled through the formation. A few officers exchanged knowing glances, the kind that said they'd seen plenty of desk jockeys try and fail to hang with operators. At that moment, a dust-covered transport jeep rolled through the main gate, its engine cutting with a mechanical growl. The passenger door opened, and Commander Amara Blake stepped onto the asphalt. She was a black woman in her late 30s, her uniform immaculate despite the long drive, her posture straight as a rifle barrel. Her face gave nothing away. No smile, no tension, just the kind of calm that came from seeing things most people couldn't imagine. She adjusted the cover on her head, grabbed a single duffel from the back seat, and walked toward the formation with measured steps. No hurry, no hesitation. Whispers started immediately among the younger recruits standing in the rear ranks. "Who's that? Some kind of quota pick, probably. Yeah, another PR experiment. Watch her wash out in a week. But she's never even seen combat." The comments weren't loud, but they weren't exactly quiet either. Amara heard them. She always did. She just didn't react. Admiral Hawkins squinted down at her from the deck, then leaned toward his aide, a thin lieutenant commander named Briggs. "That her?" "Yes, sir. Commander Amara Blake. Transferred in from Joint Special Operations Command." Hawkins raised an eyebrow. "JSOC, huh? But she's great at PowerPoint." He said it just loud enough for the officers near him to hear. A few snickered. "Let's hope she can swim faster than she files paperwork." The laughter spread. Even some of the senior enlisted joined in. Amara reached the edge of the formation and stopped. Her eyes swept the crowd, landing briefly on Hawkins. She didn't flinch, didn't frown, just held his gaze for a beat longer than most would dare. Something in that look made the laughter die in patches, like a wave losing momentum against rocks. Hawkins cleared his throat and gestured toward the training staff. "Commander Blake, welcome to Coronado. Report to Lieutenant Hayes for orientation." "Yes, sir," she replied. Her voice was calm, almost quiet, but it carried. Lieutenant Colton Hayes stepped forward, a tall white man with a sharp jawline and the swagger of someone who'd been told he was impressive since birth. He gave Amara a once-over, not bothering to hide his skepticism. "Follow me, Commander. Try to keep up." She did, effortlessly. The rest of the morning blurred into standard processing. Gear issue, barracks assignment, medical check. Amara moved through it with the efficiency of someone who'd done this a dozen times before. She spoke only when necessary, answered questions with precision, and ignored the stares. By afternoon, the real evaluation began. The training staff gathered the new evaluation unit in the main gym, a cavernous space that smelled of rubber mats and sweat. Hawkins watched from the upper observation window, arms crossed, as the group ran through basic combat drills. "Pair up," barked the lead instructor, a grizzled Master Chief named Carver. "Hand-to-hand fundamentals. I want to see control, speed, and discipline." Amara found herself across from a cocky lieutenant named Brennan, a white guy in his late 20s with arms like tree trunks and a grin that said he thought this was going to be fun. He looked her up and down and chuckled. "No offense, ma'am, but maybe take it easy. Don't want anyone getting hurt." She didn't answer, just settled into a neutral stance. "Ready," Carver called. "Go." Brennan lunged, confident and aggressive. He was fast, faster than most. But Amara was faster. She sidestepped, caught his wrist mid-swing, and used his own momentum to guide him past her. Before he could reset, she hooked his ankle, dropped her weight, and sent him crashing onto the mat. In the same fluid motion, she transitioned to a joint lock, pinning his arm at an angle that made struggling pointless. 3 seconds, maybe 4. The gym went silent. Brennan tapped the mat twice, and she released him immediately, stepping back without a word. He rolled to his feet, face flushed, confusion and embarrassment warring for control. "Lucky shot," he muttered. Nobody laughed this time. Carver nodded slowly. "Clean. Efficient. That's how it's done." He glanced around the room. Anyone else want to test their luck? No one volunteered. Up in the observation window, Hawkins leaned closer to the glass, frowning. "Briggs, pull her file again." "Already pulled it, sir." "Then pull it harder." That night, as the base settled into the quiet rhythm of taps, Amara sat alone in her assigned quarters. The barracks were old but functional. Metal frame bed, standard locker, a small desk bolted to the wall. She'd barely unpacked. The duffel sat open on the floor, half her gear still inside. She reached into the side pocket and pulled out a small black case. Inside, wrapped in soft cloth, was a medal, not one you'd find on any official registry. The medal was tarnished, the ribbon faded, but the engraving on the back was still clear. "For those who walk through fire and bring others home." She ran her thumb over the words, her face unreadable. Then, just for a moment, her eyes closed. In the silence of that room, she let herself remember. Darkness, the hiss of comms, gunfire snapping through the night like fireworks. "Shadow Blade, this is Reaper 6. We're pinned. Need immediate exfil." Her voice calm and cold. "Reaper 6, Shadow Blade. In and out. 60 seconds. The memory flickered, bodies moving, muzzle flashes, the smell of cordite and blood. Then her voice again, quieter this time, whispering into the void. "Shadow Blade. In and out." She opened her eyes, slipped the metal back into its case, and locked it in her locker. Across the base, Admiral Hawkins sat in his office, staring at a computer screen. Briggs stood behind him, arms crossed. "This doesn't make sense," Hawkins muttered. Her file's got more black bars than text. Most of her service record is classified. Top secret. Black Ops clearance. Half her deployment logs just say redacted. Should I reach out to JSOC for clarification? Hawkins rubbed his jaw. "Do it quietly. I want to know who the hell cleared her for this command." Briggs nodded and left. Hawkins leaned back in his chair, eyes still on the screen. Something about Commander Blake didn't sit right. It wasn't that she was incompetent. Clearly, she wasn't. It was the opposite. She moved like someone who'd been through hell and walked out the other side without asking permission. He didn't trust people like that. Not yet. Outside, the California night deepened. Somewhere in the distance, a jet roared across the sky, its lights blinking like a distant star. And in her quarters, Amara Blake lay on her bunk, staring at the ceiling, her breathing slow and even. She wasn't nervous. She wasn't angry. She was ready. The next morning broke with the harsh clang of reveille echoing across the base. Amara was already awake, dressed, and halfway through a set of push-ups when the rest of her barracks stirred. She moved through her routine with the precision of someone who didn't need motivation, just discipline. By the time she reached the mess hall, the place was packed. The smell of coffee and scrambled eggs filled the air, mixing with a low hum of conversation. She grabbed a tray, loaded it with oatmeal, fruit, and water, and scanned for a seat. Most tables were full, and the few with open spots seemed to close ranks as she approached. She didn't take it personally. She just found a corner table and ate in silence. Across the room, Lieutenant Colton Hayes sat with a group of officers, his voice loud enough to carry. "Did you see her yesterday?" Took Brennan down like he was a training dummy. "But she's been practicing that move for months just to show off." His buddies laughed. One of them, a stocky guy named Fuller, added, "Probably the only move she knows." Amara kept eating, her expression neutral. But the next table over, a young black officer named Lieutenant Noah Reeves frowned into his coffee. He was quiet by nature, thoughtful, the kind of guy who listened more than he spoke. He glanced at Hayes, then at Amara, and shook his head slightly. "That's discipline, not ego," Noah muttered, just loud enough for the guy next to him to hear. His table mate shrugged. "Maybe. Or maybe she's got something to prove." Noah didn't argue, but he filed the moment away. After breakfast, the evaluation unit assembled at the pool complex, a massive facility with Olympic-length lanes and a dive tower that loomed like a steel giant. Admiral Hawkins stood at the edge, clipboard in hand, his expression unreadable. "Good morning," he called out. "Today we're testing underwater endurance. Since Commander Blake seems so confident in her abilities, she'll demonstrate first." The group shifted, some exchanging glances. A few smirked. Amara stepped forward without hesitation, stripping down to her Navy-issue swim gear. Hawkins gestured to the dive platform. "Standard protocol. Swim 4 laps submerged, no surfacing. Current record is 2 minutes, 40 seconds. He paused, letting the number sink in. "Think you can handle it, Commander?" She looked at him, then at the water. "Yes, sir." "Then show us." She climbed onto the platform, took a breath, and dove. The water swallowed her without a splash, her form perfect. Beneath the surface, she moved like something born to it, smooth, efficient, no wasted motion. Her legs kicked in a steady rhythm, her arms pulling in long, controlled strokes. The crowd gathered at the edge, watching the clock. 1 minute passed, then 2. At 2:30, someone muttered, "She's going to have to surface soon." She didn't. At 3 minutes, the murmurs stopped. At 4, Hawkins leaned forward, frowning. At 5 minutes and 12 seconds, Amara surfaced at the far end, climbed out, and walked back to the group without a word. She wasn't even breathing hard. Dead silence. Hawkins stared at the stopwatch, then at her. 5 minutes, 12 seconds. New record. He said it flatly, like he was reading a grocery list. Carver, the master chief, let out a low whistle. "Damn." Hayes crossed his arms, jaw tight. "Bet she hyperventilated before the dive." "That's cheating." Noah glanced at him. "That's called preparation." Hayes shot him a look, but said nothing. The rest of the morning drills passed in a haze of tension. Amara didn't gloat, didn't even acknowledge the stares. She just moved from task to task with the same steady focus. But the whispers followed her like a shadow. "She's showing off, trying to make us look bad. Who does she think she is?" By lunch, the mess hall was buzzing. Amara grabbed her tray and headed for the same corner table. But as she passed Hayes' group, he stuck his boot out just enough to clip her ankle. She stumbled, and her tray tipped, spilling water and food across the floor. The room went quiet. Hayes looked up, feigning surprise. "Oh, sorry, Commander. Didn't see you there." Amara looked down at the mess, then at him. For a moment, the air felt thick, like the whole room was holding its breath. Then she knelt, picked up the tray, and started cleaning up the spill with napkins from a nearby dispenser. Hayes watched, his smirk fading. There was something unnerving about the way she moved, calm, methodical, like she'd dealt with far worse, and this didn't even register. She stood, tossed the napkins in the trash, and walked away without a word. Fuller leaned over to Hayes. "Dude, why does that feel creepier than if she'd decked you?" Hayes didn't answer. That night, Amara sat on her bunk, the barracks quiet except for the hum of the ventilation system. She pulled out her phone and stared at the screen, her thumb hovering over a contact labeled D. Whitmore. She didn't call. Instead, she closed her eyes and let the memory come. Afghanistan. 3 years ago, a village on fire, smoke choking the sky. She and her team, call sign Reaper unit, pinned down by hostile fire. Her closest friend, Sergeant Darius Whitmore, bleeding out from shrapnel to the leg. "Blake, leave me," he gasped. "Get the package out." "Not a chance," she'd shot back, dragging him behind cover. "You're not dying on me, Whitmore." She'd held pressure on the wound, called in the exfil, and covered their retreat with suppressing fire. They made it out, barely. But Darius took a month to walk again, and the mission got buried under a mountain of redactions. Before they'd parted ways, he'd handed her a locket. Inside was a photo of his daughter. "If they ask," he'd said, "say the mission never existed. But you remember all of us." She promised. Now, sitting in the stillness of her quarters, she whispered into the dark, "I remember, Darius. I remember." Across the base, Admiral Hawkins sat in his office, phone pressed to his ear. The line was secure, encrypted, routed through 3 different relays. "Phoenix Ops, this is Hawkins. I need information on an operator. Commander Amara Blake. Call sign unknown. Serve under JSOC. Most of her record is classified." Silence. Then a low voice distorted by the encryption. "Why are you asking, Admiral?" "Because she's under my command, and I don't like surprises." Another pause. "Some doors stay closed for a reason." "Is that a threat?" "It's advice. Leave it alone." The line went dead. Hawkins set the phone down slowly, his jaw tight. He opened his desk drawer and pulled out a thick envelope marked "Eyes Only, Project Seraph." He'd received it that morning, no return address, just his name typed on the front. Inside was a single sheet of paper. One line of text. "Shadow blades served where the light doesn't reach. Leave her in the past." He stared at the words, then at the photo clipped to the corner. A blurry image of a woman in tactical gear, face half hidden by a scarf, holding a weapon in a desert landscape. The resemblance was unmistakable. "Who the hell are you, Commander?" he muttered. The next day, rumors began to spread. Nobody knew where they started, but by noon, everyone was talking. Commander Blake had been involved in something big, something classified, something that never officially happened. Noah heard it in the locker room. Hayes heard it in the briefing hall. Even Carver, who'd seen everything in his 30 years, pulled Hawkins aside and asked, "Sir, is there something about Blake we should know?" Hawkins didn't answer. But that afternoon, during a routine training exercise, he found himself watching her more closely. The way she moved, the way she assessed threats, the way she carried herself like someone who'd been tested in ways most people couldn't fathom. And then, during a break, he made his decision. He strode into the training hall, cutting through the noise. "Commander Blake." She turned, water bottle in hand. "You served under Black Ops Command, didn't you?" The room went silent. Every eye turned toward them. Amara held his gaze. Her face didn't change. "I served where they needed me, sir." Hawkins stared at her, searching for a crack, a tell, anything. But there was nothing, just that same unshakable calm. He nodded slowly. "Dismissed." She turned and walked away. But the question hung in the air long after she was gone. 2 days later, Admiral Hawkins sat in a secure conference room deep within the base's administrative wing. The walls were soundproofed, the windows tinted, and the air conditioning hummed with a sterile efficiency. Across from him sat 3 Pentagon advisors, 2 men in suits, and a woman with steel-gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. Hawkins slid a folder across the table. "Commander Amara Blake, I need full disclosure." The woman, Deputy Director Elaine Cross, opened the folder. Her expression didn't change as she scanned the pages, but her fingers tightened on the paper. She closed it and looked up. "Admiral, this file is classified above your clearance. She's under my command. I have a right to know. You have a need to know. That's different." Cross leaned forward. "What I can tell you is this. Commander Blake has served with distinction in operations you will never read about. Her record is redacted for national security reasons. If you push this, you'll find yourself reassigned to a desk in Nebraska." One of the men, a thin figure with wire-rimmed glasses, added quietly, "Leave her alone, Admiral. She's protected at the highest level." Hawkins sat back, his jaw working. Protected by whom? By people who understand what she's sacrificed. Cross stood, gathering her things. "Drop it. That's an order." They left. Hawkins stayed in the room, staring at the folder. One word had been visible in the margins before Cross closed it. written in faded red ink. Valkyrie. Meanwhile, Noah Reeves had his own questions. That evening, he found himself in the base archives, scrolling through old deployment photos on a shared drive. He wasn't sure what he was looking for until he found it. A photograph. Afghanistan, 2022. A group of operators standing in front of Humvee, faces streaked with dust and exhaustion. In the back row, barely visible, was a woman holding a wounded child. Half her face was covered in soot, but her eyes were clear. Noah zoomed in. It was her, Commander Blake. He saved the image and leaned back, his mind racing. Whatever she'd been through, it was real, and it was heavy. The next morning, Hawkins called a formation. We're running a live-fire simulation. Full tactical scenario. Hostile environment, impossible terrain. He looked directly at Amara. Commander Blake will lead the first team. Let's see if she can handle it. The simulation was brutal. The terrain was a mock urban environment. Collapsed buildings, narrow alleys, sniper nests. The enemy was played by the base's most experienced instructors, armed with simunition rounds that hurt like hell. Amara's team consisted of 6 operators, including Hayes and Noah. As they geared up, Hayes muttered, "Hope you know what you're doing, Commander. People get hurt in these things." She checked her weapon, chamber round, and looked at him. "Then don't get hurt." The simulation began with a bang, literally. Explosions rocked the mock city. Smoke filled the air, and the enemy opened fire from 3 directions. Amara moved instantly, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Hayes, take the left flank." Noah, suppressing fire on the rooftop. "Move." They moved. She led them through the kill zone with surgical precision, using cover, coordinating fire, calling out threats before anyone else saw them. When Hayes froze under pressure, a simunition round cracking past his head, Amara grabbed his vest and pulled him behind a wall. "Breathe," she said. "Focus. You're fine." He nodded, shaken, and she was already moving again. They cleared the objective in 12 minutes. No casualties. Perfect execution. When they exited the simulation zone, Hawkins was waiting, arms crossed. He didn't say anything at first, just nodded. Carver approached, grinning. "That was textbook, ma'am. Better than textbook." Hayes, still catching his breath, looked at her differently now. Respect, grudging but real. "Thank for the save." She nodded. "Anytime." That night, Noah found her sitting alone outside the barracks, staring up at the stars. He hesitated, then sat down a few feet away. "Can I ask you something, ma'am?" "Go ahead." "What's it like? The stuff you've done?" She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "It's like walking through fire and realizing you can't put it out. You just keep walking and hope you bring people home." Noah nodded slowly. "That's what you did, isn't it? In the photo. Afghanistan." She glanced at him. "You saw that?" "Yeah, the kid you were holding. Did they make it?" Her expression softened, just a fraction. "Yeah, she made it." They sat in silence for a while, the night stretching around them. Then Noah said, "People here are starting to understand what you are. And what's that? Someone who doesn't quit." She looked back at the stars. "Let's hope that's enough." Later, back in her quarters, Amara opened her locker and pulled out the locket Darius had given her. She opened it, staring at the photo of his daughter, a little girl with bright eyes and a gap-toothed smile. Her phone buzzed. An encrypted text. "Unknown number. They found out you're back. Finish what was started." Her grip tightened on the locket. She didn't reply, just closed the message and slipped the phone into her pocket. Outside, the base was quiet, but somewhere in the darkness, something was moving. The next morning, during a routine drill, it happened. The explosion ripped through the Western Training Building, a flash of fire and a shockwave that sent recruits diving for cover. Alarms screamed. Smoke billowed into the sky. Amara was across the compound when it hit. She sprinted toward the blast, not away from it. Hawkins was already there, barking orders, coordinating emergency response. He saw her coming and pointed. "Blake, get these people back." She ignored him, heading straight for the building. 2 recruits were stumbling out, coughing, faces blackened. She grabbed them, pulled them clear, and went back in. "Blake, stand down." Hawkins shouted. She didn't. 30 seconds later, she emerged with a 3rd recruit slung over her shoulder, unconscious but breathing. She laid him down, checked his pulse, and looked up at Hawkins. Building's clear. He stared at her, then at the smoking ruin. What the hell just happened? She stood, wiping soot from her face. Sabotage. That wasn't an accident. His eyes narrowed. How do you know? Because I've seen it before. The words hung in the air like smoke. Hawkins looked at her for a long moment, then turned to Carver. Lock down the base. No one in or out. I want a full investigation. As the chaos swirled around them, Amara stood apart, her eyes scanning the crowd. Somewhere in that sea of faces, someone was watching. Someone who knew exactly what they were doing. And she was going to find them. The smoke from the explosion still hung in the air like a ghost when Admiral Hawkins assembled his senior staff in the Situation Room. The walls were lined with monitors showing security feeds, damage assessments, and personnel rosters. Amara stood near the back, arms crossed, her face unreadable despite the soot still streaking her uniform. Hawkins slammed a folder onto the conference table. I want answers. That building was inspected 2 days ago. Equipment was certified. So how does a training facility just explode? Master Chief Carver spoke up, his voice gravelly. Initial sweep shows accelerant residue near the southwest corner. This was an equipment failure, sir. Someone planted this. The room went cold. Hawkins's eyes swept across the assembled officers, landing on Amara. He held her gaze for a beat too long, then said, Commander Blake, you were first on scene. You also claimed it was sabotage before anyone else did. Care to explain how you knew? Every head turned toward her. She didn't flinch. The blast pattern, too concentrated, too clean. If it was an equipment malfunction, the explosion would have spread from a central point outward with irregular damage. This was directional, shaped. Someone knew what they were doing. Convenient expertise, Hawkins said, his tone sharp. You also happen to be the newest person on this base. Fresh arrival, unknown background, and suddenly we have an attack. Noah stepped forward, his voice careful but firm. Sir, with respect, Commander Blake pulled 3 people out of that fire. If she wanted casualties, she had every opportunity to let them happen. Hawkins shot him a look. Did I ask for your opinion, Lieutenant? No, sir. But you asked for answers. The tension crackled like static. Hawkins turned back to Amara. Where were you 2 hours before the explosion? Running perimeter drills with 2nd Platoon. 12 witnesses. And before that, reviewing tactical assessments in the operations center. Logged into the system at 0700. Didn't log out until 0930. Hawkins leaned forward, his voice dropping. Here's what I think, Commander. I think you orchestrated this. Maybe not the explosion itself, but you brought something here. Something from whatever black hole you crawled out of. And now people are getting hurt. So if I were you, I'd start talking before I make this official. Amara's expression didn't change, but her voice carried an edge that could cut steel. If I wanted revenge, Admiral, you'd already know. You wouldn't be standing here asking questions. You'd be answering them. The room went silent. Hawkins's jaw tightened. For a moment, it looked like he might explode himself. Then he straightened and pointed toward the door. Get out of my sight. All of you. Except Blake. You stay. The officers filed out. Noah hesitated at the door, glancing back, but Carver pulled him along. When they were alone, Hawkins circled the table slowly. I know you're hiding something. I know you've got blood on your hand from operations I'll never read about. But here's the thing. This is my base. My people. And if you brought a war here, I will end you. Amara met his eyes. I didn't bring the war, sir. It followed me. There's a difference. Then help me understand. She was quiet for a moment, weighing something internal. Then she said, Someone knows I'm here. Someone who doesn't want me asking questions about things that were supposed to stay buried. What things? Things you signed off on, Admiral. Things you helped bury. His face went pale. What are you talking about? Before she could answer, Briggs burst through the door. Sir, security pulled the surveillance footage. You need to see this. They moved to the monitors. Briggs pulled up a grainy feed from 3 hours before the explosion. A figure in Navy coveralls moved through the maintenance corridors, face obscured by a ball cap and tool bag slung over one shoulder. Watch the gate, Briggs said, slowing the playback. The way they move. That's not maintenance. That's training. Military training. Hawkins leaned closer. Can we get a better angle? Negative, sir. They avoided every camera with a clear sight line. Whoever this is, they knew our coverage patterns. Amara studied the screen, her eyes narrowing. Rewind. Show me that turn again. Briggs complied. The figure rounded a corner, and for just a frame, the body language shifted, shoulders, hip angle, stride length. That's Hayes, Amara said quietly. Hawkins spun toward her. Lieutenant Hayes? You're accusing one of my officers. I'm identifying a movement pattern. That's Hayes's gait. I've been watching him for 3 days. That's him. Briggs checked his roster tablet. Sir, Lieutenant Hayes logged out of the base 2 hours ago. Family emergency leave. He's off the grid. Hawkins's face darkened. Find him. Now. While the base erupted into a manhunt, Amara slipped away. She moved through the shadows of the compound with the ease of someone who'd spent years doing exactly that. Her instincts were screaming. Hayes hadn't acted alone. This was too coordinated, too precise. She made her way to a restricted hangar on the south edge of the base, one marked with faded yellow tape and a sign reading condemned. No entry. The lock was rusted, but when she tested the door, it swung open smoothly. Fresh oil on the hinges. Inside, the air was stale and thick with dust. Old crates lined the walls, most marked with codes she didn't recognize. She pulled out a small flashlight and swept the beam across the space. Then she saw it, a crate marked Project Seraph. Her breath caught. She pried the lid open. Inside were files, dozens of them, medical reports, incident logs, casualty lists, and photos. God, the photos. Soldiers in quarantine suits, makeshift containment cells, people strapped to gurneys, skin blistered and discolored. One image showed a sealed bunker, surrounded by armed guards. Another showed a woman in tactical gear standing outside that same bunker, her face half covered by a mask. She knew that woman. She'd been that woman. Her hands trembled as she flipped through the files. Project Seraph, a covert bioweapon containment operation. A terror cell had stolen an experimental pathogen from a research facility. The mission was supposed to be simple: retrieve and neutralize. But the cell had rigged the facility to release the pathogen if breached. So someone had to go in, alone, seal themselves inside, and prevent the release while the cleanup team worked outside. That someone had been her. 72 hours. No food, no sleep. Just her, a gas mask, and the knowledge that if she failed, thousands would die. She'd succeeded. Barely. When they pulled her out, she couldn't walk for a week. Couldn't eat for 2. And when she finally asked about the others who'd been exposed during the initial breach, they told her there were no others. The mission never happened. The facility never existed. They'd erased it. Erased them. And the man who'd signed the order was Admiral Richard Hawkins. Her comm crackled. Blake, where the hell are you? It was Noah. She keyed the mic south hangar. Get here. Quietly. 5 minutes later, Noah slipped through the door. He saw the open crate and the files spread across the floor. What is all this? The reason someone wants me dead. She handed him a file. His face went ashen as he read. This can't be real. It's real. I was there. I lived it. And Hawkins. He buried it. He erased the names of everyone who died so the program could continue. Noah looked at her, then at the files. We need to take this to someone. Yalk. Congress. Someone. Who do you think approved it in the first place? She stood, gathering the most damaging files. This goes higher than Hawkins. This goes all the way up. Before Noah could respond, the hangar lights blazed on. Admiral Hawkins stood in the doorway, flanked by armed guards. His face was hard as stone. Step away from the files, Commander. She didn't move. You knew. You knew what Seraph was. You knew people died, and you buried them. His jaw clenched. I did what I had to do to protect this country. You protected your career. He flinched like she'd struck him. For a moment, something cracked in his expression, guilt, maybe, or shame. Then it hardened again. Those files are classified. Removing them is treason. So, is covering up murder. They stared at each other across the dusty hangar. Then Hawkins's radio crackled. Sir, we have a situation. You need to see this. He hesitated, then gestured to the guards. Watch them. Don't let them move. He left. Amara and Noah stood in tense silence. Then Noah whispered, "What do we do?" "We wait. And we hope Hawkins still has a conscience." Minutes later, Hawkins returned. His face was ashen. He dismissed the guards with a wave, then sank onto a crate, suddenly looking every one of his 60 years. "Hayes just went live," he said quietly. "Public broadcast. He's accusing the Navy of human experimentation. He's threatening to release evidence." Amara's blood ran cold. "What evidence?" "Había con prototype. He stole it from this site. Says if we don't go public with Seraph, he'll detonate it in a populated area." The world tilted. Noah's voice cracked. "He's insane." "No," Amara said. "He's desperate. And desperate people burn everything down." Hawkins really looked at her for the first time. "You stopped this once before, didn't you? You sealed yourself in to keep it from spreading." She nodded. "Then help me stop it again." She met his eyes. "You erased the dead to save your reputation. Why should I help you now?" His voice broke. "Because innocent people will die. And I can't carry any more names." The silence stretched. Then Amara made her decision. "Where is he?" The command center erupted into controlled chaos. Screens flickered with news feeds showing Hayes's broadcast. His face haggard, eyes wild, voice trembling with conviction. "The United States Navy used us as lab rats," Hayes was saying, his image projected across every major network. "Project Seraph. They exposed us to biological agents. They watched us suffer. They buried the bodies and called it patriotism." Behind him, barely visible, was the shadow of industrial equipment. Pipes, concrete, steel beams. Amara studied the background. "That's the old Seraph containment facility. Decommissioned 8 years ago. It's in the San Bernardino Valley, about 2 hours east." Hawkins turned to her. "How do you know?" "Because I helped build it." He opened his mouth and closed it. There was nothing left to say that hadn't already been said. Briggs pulled up satellite imagery. Confirmed. Thermal scans show movement inside the main structure. Single heat signature. "He's alone?" Noah asked. "Looks like it." Amara shook her head. "He wouldn't do this alone. There's someone else. Someone feeding him intel." Hawkins's radio crackled. "Admiral, we have orders from DC, stand down. Do not engage. They're sending a federal response team." Hawkins grabbed the radio. "How long?" 4 hours minimum." "We don't have 4 hours. If Hayes has an active bioweapon and gets spooked, he could release it before they arrive." "Sir, orders are..." Hawkins cut the channel and looked at Amara. "If I send you in there, can you neutralize it?" "Hay mucha suspicion." "You really want to trust me?" "No, but I don't have a choice." He paused. "And for what it's worth, I'm sorry. For what we did to you. For what I did. It wasn't enough. Not even close. But it was something." "I'll need a team," she said. "Small. Quiet. People I can trust. Take Reeves. And Carver." She nodded. "And I'm going in unofficially. If this goes south, you never authorized it." "Understood." 30 minutes later, Amara, Noah, and Carver geared up in the armory. They moved in silence, checking weapons, comms, tactical vests. Noah's hands shook slightly as he loaded a sidearm. "You okay?" Amara asked. He nodded, unconvincing. "First time going off the books. Don't think of it that way. Think of it as doing the right thing and dealing with the paperwork later." Carver grunted. "That's a good way to end up in Leavenworth, ma'am." "Then we better not screw up." They drove east in an unmarked SUV, the desert stretching out around them like an ocean of sand and scrub. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of blood and gold. Nobody spoke. The weight of what they were about to do pressed down like a physical thing. As they approached the facility, Amara killed the headlights and rolled to a stop half a mile out. She pulled out binoculars and scanned the perimeter. The building was massive, a sprawling concrete structure half buried in the earth, designed to withstand everything from earthquakes to missile strikes. Razor wire crowned the fences. Security lights cast harsh pools of white across the grounds. One vehicle, Carver noted. Hayes' truck. No other movement. Could be a trap, Noah said. Could be. Amara lowered the binoculars. Only one way to find out. They moved on foot, using the terrain for cover. Amara led, her movements fluid and soundless. They cut through the outer fence with bolt cutters, then crept toward the main building. At the entrance, Amara paused. The door was ajar, fresh scratches on the lock. He'd been here recently. She signaled the team forward. They entered in tactical formation, weapons up, moving through the dim corridors. The air was cold and stale, smelling of rust and old concrete. Emergency lighting cast everything in sickly green. They cleared room after room. Empty offices, abandoned labs, storage areas filled with decaying equipment. Then they reached the central containment chamber. The door was sealed, marked with biohazard warnings. A control panel glowed beside it, active and humming. Amara approached the panel. A digital display showed a countdown timer. 2 hours, 43 minutes. He's rigged it to release, she said quietly. If we don't disarm this, the pathogen spreads through the ventilation system and into the valley. How do we stop it? Noah asked. She studied the panel. I need access to the lockdown protocols, but they're hardwired into the containment system. Someone has to go inside and manually override the release mechanism. Carver swore under his breath. That's a death sentence if the seal breaks. Not if we're fast. You've done this before, Noah said. It wasn't a question. Yeah, and barely survived. She pulled out a portable comms unit and linked it to Hawkins back at the base. Admiral, we've found the device. It's on a timer. I'm going in. Static. Then Hawkins's voice, tight with tension. Blake, if that seal fails. It won't. You don't know that. I know I'm the only one here who's done this before. Now shut up and keep this channel open. If something goes wrong, I'll need you to guide Noah through the external override. A long pause. God help you, Commander. He already did. Once. Let's hope he's not busy. She turned to Noah and Carver. You two stay here. Monitor the timer. If I don't make it out before it hits 0, run. Don't look back. Just run. Noah grabbed her arm. You're coming out. She gave him a small, sad smile. Plan on it. She entered the containment chamber. The interior was exactly as she remembered. White walls, sealed vents, a central column housing the pathogen storage unit. The air tasted metallic. Her suit's respirator hissed with each breath. Hayes was there, standing near the column, a remote detonator in his hand. He looked hollow, like someone carved out from the inside. They told me you'd come, he said, not looking at her. Who told you? The people who actually care about the truth. He finally turned, his eyes red-rimmed. You were part of this. You helped them build this nightmare. I helped contain it. There's a difference. Is there? We're all just cogs in their machine. She took a step closer. Hayes, listen to me. Whatever you think you're accomplishing, it's not worth killing thousands of innocent people. They're not innocent. They elected the people who did this. They cheered for the wars. They pay the taxes that fund the black sites. His voice cracked. They're complicit. You don't believe that. I have to. Because if I don't, it means my brother died for nothing. Amara froze. Your brother? He was part of Seraph, one of the test subjects. They told me he died in a training accident. But I found the real records. He was exposed, suffered for 3 weeks before his organs shut down. And they erased him. Tears streamed down Hayes' face. They erased him like he never existed. Her heart cracked. I am sorry. I'm so sorry. Sorry doesn't bring him back. No, but burning the world down doesn't honor him either. Hayes looked at the detonator in his hand. For a moment, his finger hovered over the button. Then he whispered, what do I do? You give me the trigger. You help me disarm this. And then we make sure the truth comes out. The right way. They'll bury it again. Not this time. I promise. He stared at her, searching for something. Hope? Maybe, or redemption. Then slowly he extended his hand. She took the detonator, and the room exploded into violence. A figure burst through the secondary entrance. A man in black tactical gear, face masked. He moved like liquid, closing the distance in seconds. Amara barely registered his presence before he was on her, driving a knife toward her throat. She twisted, deflected the blade, and slammed her elbow into his ribs. He grunted, spun, and kicked her legs out. She hit the floor hard, her respirator cracking. Air hissed out. Hayes scrambled backward, shouting into his comm. "Phoenix! Stand down! Phoenix!" The word hit Amara like a bullet. The attacker ignored Hayes, pulling a pistol. Amara swept his legs, rolled, and came up inside his guard. They grappled, crashing into the containment column. Alarm screamed. The timer accelerated. 60 seconds. She drove her knee into his gut, then her forehead into his nose. He staggered, and she ripped the gun from his grip. He lunged again, faster than seemed possible, and locked his hands around her throat. Her vision darkened. She clawed at his grip, gasping. Behind him, Hayes grabbed a wrench and swung it at the attacker's head. The impact echoed like a gong. Phoenix collapsed. 40 seconds. Amara crawled to the control panel, fingers flying over the interface. She input the lockdown override. A sequence burned into her memory from the last time she'd been trapped in this nightmare. 20 seconds. The system rejected the code. Error. Security protocol updated. No, she whispered, trying again. 10 seconds. Hayes knelt beside her. Use this. He pulled a data chip from his pocket. Phoenix gave it to me. Said it was insurance. She jammed it into the port. 5 seconds. The system accepted it. The timer froze. The alarm stopped. Silence. Amara collapsed on her back, chest heaving. Hayes sat beside her, staring at the unconscious Phoenix. "Who is he?" Amara asked. Hayes pulled off the mask. The face beneath was weathered, late 50s with cold gray eyes. Amara's blood turned to ice. "Arthur Kincaid," she whispered. "Phoenix, Hawkins' mentor. The man who'd orchestrated Seraph from the shadows. And he just tried to kill them all." The helicopter blades beat a steady rhythm against the night sky as Amara, Noah, and Carver escorted the unconscious Kincaid and a shaken Hayes back to Coronado. The desert sprawled below them, dark and indifferent. Nobody spoke. The weight of what had just happened pressed down like gravity itself. When they touched down on the secure naval strip, a cluster of MPs rushed forward, weapons trained. Hawkins stood at the edge of the landing zone, his face carved from stone. "Secure the prisoners," he ordered. "Medical bay, full guard. Nobody talks to them without my authorization." As the MPs hauled Kincaid away, he came to, his eyes locking on Hawkins. A slow, bitter smile spread across his face. "You always were soft, Richard. Too much conscience for this work." Hawkins didn't respond, just watched as they dragged him off. Hayes stumbled forward, hands cuffed behind his back. As he passed Amara, he whispered, "I'm sorry. I thought I was doing the right thing." "You were," she said quietly. "You just trusted the wrong people to help you do it." He nodded, something like relief flickering in his eyes, and let the MPs guide him away. Amara walked straight to the evidence vault, the recovered data drive clutched in her hand. 2 JAG officers flanked her, documenting every step with body cameras and written logs. The clerk at the desk, a young sailor with nervous hands, glanced at her face, then at the name on her transfer orders. Shadowblade. He muttered under his breath, eyes going wide. She ignored him and locked the drive in the secure storage container herself, watching as the officers sealed it with tamper-evident tape and logged the chain of custody. "Nobody touches this without a court order," she told them. "Yes, ma'am." As she left the vault, Noah caught up with her. "That was too close. It always is. Do you think it's over?" She looked at him, weighing honesty against comfort. "No, this is just the beginning." Across the base, Admiral Hawkins sat alone in his office, staring at his phone. It rang, a DC number he recognized. Pentagon Undersecretary. He answered. "Hawkins, Admiral, I'm calling to inform you that Project Seraph is now under Senate oversight review. You are not to interfere with the investigation in any capacity. Do you understand?" "I understand." "Good. And Admiral, I'd suggest you retain legal counsel. This isn't going to be pleasant." The line went dead. Hawkins set the phone down carefully, then turned to the framed commendations on his wall. 30 years of service, 3 combat deployments, a Silver Star, a Legion of Merit, decorations he'd once worn with pride. Now they looked like lies. He pulled them down one by one and laid them on his desk. By morning, the media storm had begun. An anonymous tip reached a national news network, and by breakfast, the story was everywhere. Secret Project Seraph were naval operators used as test subjects. The headlines screamed across every screen. News vans lined the perimeter fence. Reporters shouted questions at anyone in uniform. Inside the base, morale fractured. Some officers rallied behind Hawkins, insisting he'd been following orders. Others whispered that he'd been complicit. Trust, once solid, turned brittle as glass. Noah found himself pulled into an NCIS interview room. Two agents sat across from him, their expressions neutral but their questions sharp. "Lieutenant Reeves, you accompanied Commander Blake on an unauthorized operation yesterday. Is that correct?" "Yes." "Did Admiral Hawkins order you to go?" Noah hesitated. He could feel the trap closing. If he said yes, Hawkins would be implicated. If he said no, he'd be admitting to insubordination. "I volunteered," he said finally. "Why?" "Because it was the right thing to do." The lead agent, a woman with sharp eyes and graying hair, slid a piece of paper across the table. "This is a voluntary resignation. Sign it, and we'll call this a lapse in judgment. Refuse, and you'll face a court-martial for dereliction of duty." Noah stared at the paper. His career reduced to a single signature. "No," he said. "Excuse me." "I said no. If you want to court-martial me for stopping a bioweapon attack, go ahead. But I'm not pretending I did something wrong." The agent's expression flickered. Surprise, maybe, or respect. She took the paper back. "You're dismissed, Lieutenant." For now. In the infirmary, he sat on a gurney, wrists still cuffed to the bed frame. His face was bruised, his eyes hollow. Amara entered quietly, and the guard outside gave her 5 minutes. She pulled up a chair. "Why did you trust Kincaid?" Hayes laughed bitterly. "He told me he was investigating Seraph, that he needed proof to bring it down. I thought he was one of the good guys. You wanted justice for your brother. I wanted someone to remember him." His voice cracked. They erased his name. Like he was nothing. Like he didn't matter. He mattered, Amara said firmly. "And now people will know. That data we recovered, it has everything. Names, dates, medical records. Your brother's name will be public." Hayes looked up, tears streaming down his face. "Will it be enough? I don't know, but it's more than he had before." That night, alone in her quarters, Amara opened the locket Darius had given her. She stared at the photo of his daughter, now a teenager, smiling at a camera somewhere far from war and secrets. Behind the photo, she found what she'd been looking for, a nano SD card, no bigger than her thumbnail. She'd always known it was there. Darius had told her before he left that if anything ever happened, she'd need it. She plugged it into her laptop. The encryption was military grade, but the hash matched the stolen drive Hayes had taken. It was a key only she could use. Her comm buzzed. "Hawkins. Blake, I need you in the vault. Now." 10 minutes later, she stood in the evidence room with Hawkins and the 2 JAG officers. The recovered drive sat on the table between them, locked and sealed. "The court authorized limited access," one of the JAG officers explained, "but only with the proper decryption key." Hawkins looked at Amara. "Do you have it?" She held up the SD card. "Darius gave this to me before he deployed on his last mission. He said it was insurance." "Against what?" "Against people like Kincaid erasing the truth." She inserted the card into a secure terminal. The system hummed, processing. Then the drive unlocked. Files flooded the screen. Hundreds of them. Medical reports showing systematic exposure to biological agents. Payment schedules from Helios Defense, a private military contractor. Emails between Kincaid and Pentagon officials discussing acceptable casualty rates. And a list. A long, terrible list. Names of the dead. Operators who'd been exposed, suffered, and died. Their deaths listed as training accidents, equipment failures, natural causes. All eyes. Hayes' brother was on that list. So were 23 others. One of the JAG officers went pale. This is evidence of war crimes." Hawkins sat down heavily. "I signed off on the redactions. Kincaid told me it was classified for operational security. I believed him. Did you know about the experiments?" "No. God, no. I thought we were just burying failed missions." "Not." He gestured helplessly at the screen. "Not this." Amara, close the file. Now you know. Question is, what are you going to do about it? Before he could answer, the power flickered. The lights died, plunging the room into darkness. Emergency lighting kicked in a second later, bathing everything in red. An alarm blared. Security breach. Evidence server compromised. Amara bolted for the main terminal. The screen showed a cascade of deletion commands, files vanishing in real time. Someone was trying to wipe the drive remotely. She dropped into the chair, and her fingers flew across the keyboard, inputting countermeasures, isolating the network, cutting external access. The deletion slowed, then stopped, but not before damage was done. 10% of the files were gone. On the screen, a message appeared, typed in real time by the attacker. You can't resurrect the dead, Valkyrie. Then the connection severed. Amara stared at the screen, her jaw tight. They know. They know we have the files, and they're trying to bury them again. Hawkins stood. We need to move fast. Get everything backed up. Multiple copies. Air-gapped systems. The JAG officer nodded. I'll coordinate with federal investigators. This is beyond military jurisdiction now. As they worked, Amara pulled Noah aside. Whoever did this, they have access to our systems. Someone inside the base. Someone with clearance. How do we find them? We don't. We make sure the data gets out before they can stop us. She looked back at Hawkins, who was on the phone with someone in Washington, his voice clipped and urgent. The old guard was crumbling. And in the rubble, something new, something honest, might finally have room to grow. But first, they'd have to survive the fallout. The morning after the cyber breach, four black SUVs rolled through the Coronado gates bearing Senate seals. By noon, Amara, Hawkins, Noah, and Hayes, still in restraints, were on a military transport bound for Washington. The weight of what was coming pressed down on all of them, like atmospheric pressure before a storm. The Senate hearing room was exactly what Amara expected. Wood-paneled walls, brass fixtures, rows of seats packed with journalists, military brass, and civilians hungry for justice or blood, depending on their perspective. Camera crews lined the back wall. Every word spoken here would echo across the nation. Senator Patricia Monroe, the hearing chairwoman, was a lean woman in her 60s with silver hair pulled back severely and eyes that missed nothing. She gavelled the room to order, and the murmur of conversation died instantly. This committee convenes to investigate allegations of human experimentation conducted under Project Seraph, Monroe began, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd spent decades in these halls. We will hear testimony from all relevant parties. Witnesses will answer fully or invoke their rights. Perjury will end careers and lives. Are we clear? A chorus of agreement rippled through the room. As they broke for a brief recess before testimony began, Hawkins stood in the marble hallway outside, trying to steady his breathing. A man in a gray suit brushed past him, moving with the casual confidence of someone who belonged. As he passed, he leaned in just slightly and whispered, "Stand down or your pension disappears." Hawkins froze, turning to look, but the man had already vanished into an elevator marked with a brass plate. Contractor access only. His hand shook. He'd spent 30 years earning that pension. It was supposed to take care of his daughter's medical bills, fund his grandkids' college. But as he stood there in that cold hallway, he realized something. Some things were worth more than money. He walked back into the hearing room with his spine straight. The first witness was Derek Paulson, CEO of Helios Defense. He was a polished man in his 50s, expensive suit, perfect hair, the kind of executive who'd learned to smile while gutting budgets. He placed his hand on the Bible and swore to tell the truth. Senator Monroe wasted no time. Mr. Paulson, records show that Helios Defense received over $40 million in contracts related to Project Seraph between 2019 and 2023. What services did your company provide? Security consultation and logistics support, Senator. Standard contractor work. Standard. Monroe slid a document across the bench. This is an invoice from your company. Line item 17 reads, Bioexposure Diagnostic Services, Hazard Death Rate Compensation. Can you explain what that means? Paulson's smile didn't waver, but something flickered behind his eyes. That refers to medical monitoring for personnel working in potentially hazardous environments. Standard occupational health and safety. At a rate of $50,000 per individual. Hazardous work commands hazardous pay, Senator. Monroe leaned forward. Mr. Paulson, were any personnel under Helios contracts exposed to biological agents as part of Project Seraph? No, Senator. Absolutely not. Any suggestion otherwise is fabrication designed to damage my company's reputation. Amara sat in the witness gallery, watching. Her jaw tightened. She'd read those invoices. She knew what they meant. Monroe called Amara next. She walked to the witness table, the room tracking her every movement. She took the oath, a maintenance worker, coveralls, tool belt, completely unremarkable, had pulled a suppressed pistol and was aiming at the hallway where Hawkins stood talking to his attorney. Amara didn't think. She just moved. Gun, she shouted, sprinting forward. She tackled Hawkins as the first shot hissed past, punching into the marble wall where his head had been. They hit the floor hard, and Amara rolled, coming up in a crouch. Noah was already on the shooter, closing the distance. The man swung the weapon toward him, but Noah ducked under the arc and drove his shoulder into the attacker's chest. They crashed into a water fountain. The gun skittered across the floor. Capitol Police swarmed in, weapons drawn. The shooter was pinned, cuffed, and hauled away within seconds. Medics rushed to check Hawkins, but he waved them off. I'm fine. Blake, are you? I'm fine, sir. Security swept the man's phone. One contact, a single name in the directory. Phoenix. The hearing resumed an hour later under heavy security. Senator Monroe looked shaken but determined. We will not be intimidated, she declared. This committee will see justice done. Hawkins was called to testify again. He approached the bench, and this time there was no hesitation in his voice. Senator, I need to enter a statement. Under oath. Proceed, Admiral. I signed redaction orders I didn't fully understand. I trusted a man named Arthur Kincaid, a DoD-CIA liaison, to guide decisions on Project Seraph. He told me we were protecting national security. But the truth is, we were protecting a program that used our own people as test subjects. His voice cracked. Commander Blake protected the people. I did not, and I will carry that failure for the rest of my life. The room was absolutely silent. Monroe nodded slowly. Admiral, do you know Arthur Kincaid's current location? He was apprehended during the containment facility operation. He's in federal custody. Good, because this committee is issuing a warrant for his immediate testimony. She looked at the gallery. We will identify every individual responsible for Project Seraph. Every contractor, every official, every signature. The hearing adjourned for the day. Outside, protesters had gathered, dueling factions. Some held signs reading justice for the fallen. Others waved flags and shouted about national security. The divide was sharp, angry, and growing. That night, Amara sat in her hotel room, staring at her phone. A secure message had come through from an unknown number. Cold storage bank box. Registered under Hawkins. Arlington Federal. Box 447. She forwarded it to Monroe's staff, then to Noah. Within an hour, federal agents had the box open. Inside was an audio drive. The original Seraph emergency recording from the night Amara had sealed herself inside the containment facility. Hawkins's voice was on it, authorizing the lockdown. But so was Kincaid's, coldly calculating casualty projections, discussing acceptable losses, ordering the burial of evidence. It was proof. Undeniable, unredacted proof. Hawkins had kept it all these years. Insurance against the day the truth came calling. He delivered it to Amara himself the next morning, standing in the hotel lobby, looking older than he had just days before. You should be the one to release it, he said quietly. You earned that right. She took the drive. Why now? Why did you keep this? Because part of me always knew this day would come, and I wanted to make sure I could do the right thing when it did. He paused, even if it destroys me. She looked at him, really looked at him, and saw something she hadn't expected. Remorse. Real, raw remorse. It won't destroy you, she said. It'll free you. He nodded, not quite believing, and walked away. The drive was entered into evidence. The media exploded. Kincaid's voice, cold and calculating, played on every network. Public opinion shifted like a landslide. Helios Defense's stock plummeted. Congressional offices were flooded with calls demanding accountability. And somewhere in a federal holding cell, Arthur Kincaid sat in silence, knowing his empire was crumbling. The audio drive changed everything. Within 48 hours, Senator Monroe convened a closed emergency session. Amara, Hawkins, Noah, and a select team of federal investigators sat around a secure conference table in a room swept for bugs 3 times. Monroe pulled up a map on the wall screen. The metadata from Hawkins's audio drive points to a server farm operated by Helios Defense. It's disguised as a maritime logistics hub in Corsoya, a free port in the North Atlantic with limited extradition agreements. An FBI cyber analyst, a young woman named Priya Desai, leaned forward. The server's tagged PHX Arch, Phoenix Archive. If Kincaid has contingency files, blackmail, financial records, communication logs, they're there. Can we access it remotely? Hawkins asked. No, sir. It's air-gapped from the internet. Physical access only. And it's got state-of-the-art security, biometrics, armed guards, drone surveillance. Monroe looked at Amara. Commander, I'm authorized to greenlight a covert operation to seize that data. But it has to be joint, federal, and military. And it has to be clean. Amara nodded. I'll need a team. Small. Capable. You'll have it. And one more thing. If we're doing this, we do it with full legal authority. Capture warrants. Rules of engagement. No black ops. No deniability. Monroe smiled faintly. Agreed. This is about transparency, Commander. Not more shadows. The team assembled over the next 24 hours. Amara handpicked the operators. Noah for signals intelligence. 2 seasoned combat divers named Jackson and Torres, a combat medic named Ellis, and Priya Desai to handle the cyber infiltration. Hawkins volunteered as mission advisor, knowing full well it might be his last act in uniform. They flew to a forward staging base in Iceland, then transferred to a waiting Navy vessel offshore from Corsoya. The North Atlantic was brutal, gray water, bitter wind, waves that hit like hammers. But the team moved with quiet efficiency, checking gear, reviewing blueprints, running through contingencies. At midnight, under cloud cover so thick the moon was just a suggestion, they launched from the ship in a rigid-hull, inflatable boat. The RHIB cut through the swells, engine muted, running lights dark. Corsoya's container port loomed ahead, a forest of cranes and stacked shipping containers lit by harsh sodium lights. They clipped onto a crane's maintenance ladder and climbed hand over hand, boots silent on cold steel. At the top, Amara signaled. They rappelled down into the container yard, landing between rows of freight containers. Priya pulled out a tablet and spoofed the perimeter sensors, feeding them looped footage while the team moved through blind spots. They reached the main hangar, a massive refrigerated structure humming with the sound of thousands of server racks. The door was biometric locked. Priya pulled a cloned access card from her vest, lifted this off a Helios executive's laptop during discovery. Cross your fingers. She swiped. The lock blinked green. They were in. The interior was a cathedral of technology, row after row of glowing servers, cables snaking across the floor like veins, the air cold enough to sting. Priya moved to a central terminal, her fingers flying across the keyboard. Found it. PHX Arch. Live relay to Kincaid's personal servers. She plugged in a portable drive. Mirroring now. I need 6 minutes. Jackson posted at the door, watching the exterior through a fiber optic camera. We've got foot patrol. 3 guards. 30 seconds out. Amara signaled. The team dropped into defensive positions, using server racks as cover. The guards passed, voices muffled, flashlights sweeping. They didn't enter. Clear, Jackson whispered. Priya's screen filled with progress bars. For minutes, Hawkins, monitoring from the ship, came over comms. Be advised, facility security is rotating shifts. You got a 10-minute window before the next sweep. Copy, Amara replied. Then the speakers crackled to life throughout the hangar. A voice, Kincaid's voice, piped in remotely. echoed across the cavernous space. Stand down, Valkyrie. You've already lost. I'll trade my capture for every dead name struck from history. Walk away now, and they stay buried. Push forward, and their families learn what really happened. You want that blood on your hands. Amara's jaw tightened. She keyed her mic. They deserve to be remembered, not erased. Their families deserve the truth. Truth is a luxury, Commander. Survival is necessity. Then you've already lost, Kincaid. Because I stopped surviving a long time ago. Now I'm just living right. Silence. Then alarm screamed. Security's converging. Jackson shouted. Multiple contacts, all sides. Priya's hands never stopped moving. 3 minutes. I need 3 minutes. Amara made the call. Defensive perimeter. Non-lethal if possible. We're not here to start a war. The team moved into a wedge formation, using forklift pallets and server racks as makeshift barricades. The first wave of guards entered. 8 men in tactical gear, weapons raised. Federal operation. Amara shouted, "Stand down or be detained." They didn't stand down. Flashbangs tumbled across the floor. Amara shielded her eyes, firing simunition rounds, rubber bullets that hit hard but didn't kill. Torres dropped 3 guards with precise leg shots. Noah used a taser on a 4th. But more were coming. 2 minutes. Priya called, sweat beading on her forehead despite the cold. Jackson found a biometric locked door at the far end. Got something here. Vault door. Amara moved to him. Can you breach it? Not without Priya. She looked back. Priya was locked in, fingers dancing across keys, eyes fixed on cascading data. Hawkins's voice crackled over comms. Blake, you've got 2 fast boats launching from the pier. They're moving to cut off your exfil. Copy. Ellis, get to the RHIB. Prep for emergency extraction. Ellis sprinted for the exit. The vault door's biometric scanner glowed red. Amara pulled out a portable scanner and pressed it against the lock. It cycled through stolen profiles, 3 failures, then a match. The door clicked open. Inside was a small room lined with physical files, old-school paper, immune to hacking. Binders labeled with dates, names, dollar amounts. Noah grabbed a camera and started photographing every page, working faster than seemed possible. 1 minute, Priya shouted. Gunfire cracked outside. Real gunfire now. The security team had escalated. Torres, suppressing fire. Amara ordered. Jackson, cover Priya. Torres laid down controlled bursts, keeping the guards pinned behind containers. Jackson positioned himself between Priya and the incoming fire, his body a shield. The progress bar hit 99%. Then the power died. Emergency lights kicked in, red and pulsing. Priya swore. They cut the main feed. I'm on battery. 30 seconds left. Amara grabbed a smoke grenade and lobbed it toward the entrance. Thick gray smoke billowed, obscuring the guard sight lines. Everyone on me. We're moving. They collapsed toward the exit in a fighting retreat. Priya yanked the drive free at 99.6% and stuffed it in her vest. Got it. They burst out onto the pier. The 2 fast boats were closing, spotlights sweeping. Ellis had the RHIB running, engine roaring. Go, go, go. They leapt into the boat. Ellis punched the throttle, and the RHIB surged forward. One of the fast boats cut across their path, trying to force a collision. Amara grabbed the wheel, yanked it hard left, and used the rib's wake to send a rogue wave crashing into the pursuer's bow. The boat veered off, its pilot fighting for control. The second boat kept coming, a guard on the bow manning a mounted machine gun. Rounds stitched across the water, too close. Priya pulled a flare gun from the emergency kit and fired into the air. The brilliant white light blinded the drone operator tracking them from above. The boat's spotlight lost them for critical seconds. Torres grabbed a floating container buoy and shoved it into the water behind them. The pursuing boat clipped it, spun out, and lost speed. They disappeared into the fog, the coast of Corsoya fading behind them like a bad memory. Back on the Navy vessel, they collapsed onto the deck, breathing hard. Priya held up the drive, grinning despite her exhaustion. We got it. Phoenix Arrecife, 99.6%. Everything: financial records, communications, survivor lists, blackmail files. Enough to bury Helios and everyone in their pocket. Hawkins, standing at the rail, looked at Amara. "You did it." She shook her head. "We did it. All of us." He smiled faintly. "Maybe, but you're the one who never stopped walking through fire." Noah sat beside her, soaking wet and exhausted but grinning. "What now?" Amara looked out at the dark ocean, thinking of Darius, of Hayes's brother, of all the names on that terrible list. Now we give the living their names back. As the ship turned for home, the data drive was sealed in a secure case, chain of custody logged and witnessed. And somewhere in a federal cell, Arthur Kincaid watched the news reports and knew his endgame had arrived. The data from Corsoya hit Washington like a bomb. Within 72 hours of their return, Senator Monroe's committee published a redacted tranche, enough to confirm the worst suspicions without compromising ongoing prosecutions. The full data set was authorized for public release pending judicial review. The nation reeled. News anchors struggled to find words adequate to the scale of betrayal. Social media exploded with outrage, grief, and demands for justice. Families who'd spent years believing their loved ones died in training accidents or vehicle collisions now learned the truth. They've been test subjects in an illegal program, their deaths covered up by the very system that was supposed to protect them. Vigils sprang up outside military bases across the country. Some families wept. Others raged. All of them finally had names to mourn properly. At a church in Tennessee, a woman named Carol Brennan stood before a photograph of her son, a Navy SEAL who'd supposedly drowned during a routine dive. Now she knew he'd been exposed to a biological agent and died slowly, painfully, while Helios Defense documented his decline for their research files. She placed flowers beneath his picture and whispered, "I always knew something was wrong. I always knew." In Michigan, a father learned his daughter hadn't committed suicide. She'd been euthanized when her exposure symptoms became too visible to hide. He sat in his garage for 3 hours, staring at her medals, before finally calling a reporter. The stories multiplied, each one a knife wound to the country's conscience. Federal arrest warrants swept across Helios Defense like a tidal wave. The FBI raided their headquarters in Virginia, seizing servers, files, and personnel. Executives were walked out in handcuffs while news cameras rolled. Derek Paulson, the CEO who testified so confidently before the Senate, was apprehended at a private airstrip with a passport, $2 million in cash, and a ticket to a country with no extradition treaty. Arthur Kincaid watched it all from his cell on a small television mounted high on the wall. His expression never changed, cold, calculating, already working angles even as his empire burned. When federal marshals came to transport him to trial, he looked up calmly and said, "I want to make a deal." They led him to an interrogation room where Senator Monroe, 2 Justice Department prosecutors, and Amara waited. Kincaid sat down, hands cuffed to the table, and looked directly at Amara. "You think you've won. You haven't. You just traded one shadow for another." "We've brought the truth to light," Monroe said coldly. "That's more than you ever allowed." "Truth?" Kincaid laughed, a dry, bitter sound. "You've exposed a single program. There are dozens more. Deeper, darker, run by people who made me look like a saint." "Then give us their names," one of the prosecutors said. "I could, in exchange for immunity and relocation." The room went silent. Amara leaned forward. "You want immunity? After what you did to those people?" "I want to survive. Just like you did, Commander. We're not so different. We both made choices in the dark. We're nothing alike. I chose to protect people. You chose to use them." Kincaid's smile faded. "I was protecting the nation. Those people volunteered to serve. They knew the risks. They didn't know they'd be test subjects. They didn't know you'd erase them when they became inconvenient." He stared at her, searching for cracks. Finding none, he shifted tactics. "You'll never clean this up. There are too many players. Too much money. Too many people in power who benefited. You think taking me down changes that?" Amara stood. "Maybe not. But every journey starts with a single step. And you're that step." She walked out. The prosecutors followed, leaving Kincaid alone with his thoughts and the weight of his failures. 3 weeks later, Admiral Richard Hawkins stood before a military review board in full dress uniform. The hearing was closed to the public, but the outcome would be announced publicly. His career, his reputation, everything he'd built for 30 years, all of it balanced on this moment. The board consisted of 5 senior officers, faces carved from granite. The presiding admiral, a man named Garrett with silver hair and a chest full of ribbons, read the charges. Admiral Hawkins, you are accused of authorizing the concealment of casualties, falsifying official records, and failing to report evidence of criminal activity. How do you plead? Hawkins stood. Guilty on all counts. A murmur ran through the room. You understand the severity of these charges? Garrett asked. Yes, sir. Then why did you do it? Hawkins took a breath. Because I believed I was protecting national security. Because I trusted someone I shouldn't have. And because I was a coward. His voice cracked. I looked at those files. I saw the signatures. And I chose to believe the lie because it was easier than facing the truth. Those people died because I failed them. And I'll carry that for the rest of my life. The room was silent. Garrett consulted with the other board members, then looked up. The board finds your admission of guilt commendable, but insufficient to absolve you of responsibility. You are hereby stripped of command, effective immediately. Your retirement will be at reduced rank, and you will forfeit 50% of your pension. Hawkins nodded. I understand. However, Garrett's expression softened slightly. Your cooperation with the Senate investigation and your provision of critical evidence have been noted. You will not face criminal prosecution. Dismissed. Hawkins saluted one last time, turned, and walked out of the military for good. Outside, Amara was waiting. She didn't say anything, just stood beside him as he stared up at the sky. I don't know what I'm supposed to do now, he said quietly. You tell the truth. You help the families. You spend the rest of your life making it right. Will that be enough? I don't know, but it's more than they had before. He looked at her. Thank you. For not giving up. For being what I should have been. She nodded. Be better tomorrow than you were today. That's all any of us can do. He walked away, shoulders straight despite the weight he carried. Meanwhile, Colton Hayes stood in a different courtroom, a military tribunal. His charges were more severe. Sabotage, theft of classified materials, conspiracy. But his testimony had been crucial, and his motives, while misguided, had been born from genuine pain. The judge, a stern woman named Colonel Rivera, delivered the verdict. Lieutenant Hayes, you endangered lives and damaged government property. However, your cooperation with investigators and your role in exposing Project Seraph have been considered. You were sentenced to 5 years confinement, suspended pending completion of 3 years supervised probation and 2,000 hours of community service with veterans advocacy groups. Hayes exhaled, relief and regret warring on his face. Thank you, Your Honor. Don't thank me, Lieutenant. Thank Commander Blake. She spoke on your behalf. Don't waste the chance she's given you. I won't. 2 months later, Amara and Noah drove to a rehabilitation clinic on the outskirts of Tucson. The facility was quiet, surrounded by desert and mountains, a place designed for healing away from the noise of the world. Inside, they met with 2 survivors of Project Seraph who'd been found using the Corsoya data. Men who'd been sent to overseas clinics and told they were receiving treatment for combat-related injuries. In reality, they'd been hidden away, their symptoms monitored and documented until they could be quietly discharged and disappeared into the system. The first was a man named Marcus Williams, late 40s, with eyes that had seen too much. When he saw Amara, he went still. I know that voice, he said quietly. You were there, the night in the bunker. You sang, quietly, through the wall. Just something to let us know we weren't alone. Amara's throat tightened. I remember. I thought you died with us. Marcus said, his voice breaking. They told us everyone was gone. I made it out. Barely. The second survivor, a younger man named Terrell Jackson, stepped forward. Shadowblade. That's what we heard on the comms before everything went dark. You stayed when you could have run. She nodded, unable to speak. Marcus reached out and clasped her hand. You gave us hope when we had nothing. Thank you. They talked for an hour about the program, the lies, the years lost, and about what came next. The survivors wanted to testify publicly, to put faces to the names on the casualty lists. They wanted the world to see what had been done. Amara promised to help make it happen. As they drove back to the base, Noah glanced at her. "You okay?" "Yeah, it's real now, you know. It's not just files and testimony. It's people, living people who survived. Because of you." She shook her head. "Because they refused to give up. I just tried to make sure they weren't forgotten." Back at Coronado, a courier delivered a formal envelope. Inside was an offer, a promotion to captain and command of a newly created office, the Valkyrie Office of Ethical Operations. The office would have independent authority to investigate military contractor abuses, with public quarterly reports, whistleblower protection, and rank-blind immunity. Senator Monroe had attached a personal note. "Commander Blake, this is your chance to make sure what happened to you never happens to anyone else. The choice is yours." Amara sat in her quarters, staring at the letter. Part of her wanted to walk away, to leave the military, the politics, the whole mess behind. She'd given enough, sacrificed enough. But then she thought of Marcus and Terrell, of Hayes's brother, of Darius, of all the names on that list who'd never get another chance. She picked up her phone and called Noah. "If I take this, I need someone I can trust as deputy. Someone who won't bend when the pressure comes." "You're taking it?" "Yeah, I think I am." "Then I'm in. All the way." She smiled. "Good, because this is going to get ugly. It already is. Might as well make it count." She hung up and drafted her acceptance letter. Then she pulled out Darius's locket, now engraved with new words his mother had added. Heard. Known. Remembered. For the first time since that night in the bunker, she let herself cry. Not from pain, not from loss, but from something that felt dangerously close to hope. Tomorrow would bring new battles, new shadows to walk through. But tonight, she let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, the light was finally stronger than the dark. The morning of the recognition ceremony arrived with crisp, clear skies. The Naval Academy's grand rotunda had been transformed. Flags of every service branch lined the walls, their colors vivid in the streaming sunlight. Rows of white chairs filled the marble floor, occupied by active duty personnel, veterans, families of the fallen, and survivors. Amara stood in a side room, adjusting her dress uniform. The medals on her chest felt heavier than usual. Noah appeared in the doorway, similarly dressed, his expression a mixture of pride and nerves. "Big crowd out there," he said. "National coverage. This is going to be everywhere." "Good. They should see this. How are you feeling?" She looked at her reflection in the mirror, a woman who'd walked through fire and somehow found her way back. "Like I'm finally standing in the right place." Outside, the rotunda buzzed with quiet conversation. Cameras lined the back wall, their lenses aimed at the central dais. In the front rows sat the families, people who'd spent years in the dark, now finally in the light. Carol Brennan, who'd learned her son didn't drown. Marcus Williams and Terrell Jackson, survivors who'd refused to stay silent. And in a seat of honor, a young woman with Darius's eyes, his daughter, now 23, who'd flown in from Atlanta. Colton Hayes sat near the back, out of uniform but present. He'd earned the right to witness this, despite everything. Senator Monroe stood at a podium, calling the room to order. "We gather today, not just to honor courage, but to acknowledge a debt we can never fully repay. The individuals we recognize today served in silence, protected by shadows, and asked nothing in return. Today, we give them what they've always deserved, recognition." The audience rose as Amara entered, flanked by Noah and Priya Desai, who'd been essential to the offshore operation. They walked down the center aisle, and the applause began, tentative at first, then building to something thunderous. Admiral Garrett, the same man who'd presided over Hawkins's hearing, stood ready to present the medals. But before he could begin, a figure stepped forward from the civilian seating. Richard Hawkins, no longer in uniform, just a gray suit and the weight of his choices visible in every line of his face. Amara had invited him herself, not as military brass, but as a witness to truth. Senator Monroe nodded. "At Commander Blake's request, Mr. Hawkins will present the medals." "It's Unconventional. But then so is this entire journey. Hawkins approached the dais, his steps measured. He looked out at the crowd, at the families, the survivors, the cameras. Then he turned to Amara. "Commander Blake," he began, his voice carrying across the rotunda. "Protocol dictates that I ask you for your call sign before presenting this honor. It's tradition, a bond between warriors." The room held its breath. He smiled faintly, a sad, remorseful smile tinged with respect. "So, I ask you, Commander, what is your call sign?" Amara looked past him at the faces in the crowd. At Marcus, who'd survived because someone refused to leave him behind. At Darius's daughter, who'd finally learned the truth about her father's sacrifice. At Noah, who'd chosen to stay when he could have walked away. At Hayes, who'd burned everything down trying to find justice for his brother. She spoke clearly, her voice steady and strong. "Shadowblade, not because I survived the dark, because I refused to leave anyone in it." The room erupted in applause. But then, from the side entrance, commotion shattered the moment. Derek Paulson, Helios Defense's former CEO, burst through the security cordon. He was out on bail pending trial, flanked by federal marshals, but he'd somehow slipped their custody. His face was flushed with rage, his expensive suit rumpled. "This is a show trial," he shouted, his voice cracking. "These people are lying. Helios saved lives. We protected this country." A marshal grabbed his arm, but Paulson yanked free. "You're destroying good people for political gain. This woman," he pointed at Amara, "is a puppet." Someone from the civilian section threw a cup of water. It arced through the air and splashed across Paulson's face, drenching him. He sputtered, shocked, as gasps rippled through the crowd. The marshals moved in immediately, restraining him as security personnel converged. But in the chaos, another figure entered from the back, a young woman moving slowly, carefully, using forearm crutches. The camera operators swung their lenses toward her. Amara recognized her immediately. She was one of the survivors. Her name was Lena Whitmore, Darius's daughter, the girl from the photograph in the locket. But she'd also been exposed during a later Seraph incident, one that had left her with nerve damage. She'd spent 5 years learning to walk again. The room fell silent as Lena made her way forward, each step deliberate and painful. No one moved to help her. This was her walk to make. She reached the front row, and Amara stepped down from the dais to meet her. They stood face to face, two women connected by sacrifice and survival. Lena's eyes were bright with tears. "My father talked about you in his letters. He said you were the bravest person he'd ever known." Amara's voice caught. He was wrong. He was. "No," Lena said firmly. "He was right. Because you're still fighting. For him. For all of them. For me." She reached out, and Amara took her hand. The cameras captured the moment. Two survivors, two warriors connected across time and pain. The visual, the emotion, the raw humanity of it. It overwhelmed Richard Hawkins. He'd been holding himself together through sheer will. But seeing Lena, seeing what the program had cost, seeing Amara refuse to let it break her, it shattered something inside him. His face went pale. His knees buckled. He reached for the podium to steady himself, but his legs gave out completely. He collapsed into a chair someone had shoved forward just in time, tears streaming down his face. "I'm sorry," he whispered over and over. "God, I'm so sorry." Noah and a medic rushed forward, but Hawkins waved them off. "I'm fine. I needed to really see what we did." Amara helped Lena to a seat, then returned to the dais. She looked at Hawkins, still slumped in the chair, then at the crowd. "This isn't about revenge," she said, her voice carrying across the silent room. "It's not about destroying careers or tearing down institutions. It's about making sure we never forget that honor isn't given, it's earned. Every single day, by choosing people over politics, truth over convenience, light over shadows." Senator Monroe stepped forward, steadying herself. "Commander Blake, it is my honor to present you with the Valor Cross, with a unique inscription, for guarding the living and returning the lost to their names." She pinned the medal to Amara's chest. The applause was deafening. Then Amara stepped to the microphone. I accept this honor not for myself, but for everyone who served in silence, for everyone who was erased, and for everyone who survived. She looked directly at the cameras. Honor is not metal. It's daylight. When we share it, shadows recede. My call is simple. If you are ordered to choose between the mission and the people, choose the people, and we'll redefine the mission together. The audience rose as one, the standing ovation lasting 3 full minutes. When the ceremony concluded, Amara stood outside in the clear afternoon light. Noah joined her, along with Priya, Hayes, Marcus, Terrell, and Lena. What now? Priya asked. Amara smiled. Now we get to work. The Valkyrie office officially opens Monday. We've got cases waiting, whistleblowers coming forward, and a system that needs watching. And changing, Noah added. And changing, Amara agreed. Hey, step forward, hesitant. I know I don't have a right to ask, but if you need someone who understands what it's like to burn everything down and try to rebuild, I'm here. Amara studied him for a moment, then nodded. We'll find a place for you. Everyone deserves a chance to do better. As the group dispersed, Amara stood alone for a moment, looking up at the sky. She thought of Darius, of all the names on the list, of the long road that had led here. Then she turned and walked toward the future, a future where shadows couldn't hide the truth, where the fallen would be remembered, and where people like her would stand watch to make sure it never happened again. The camera held on her face, calm, steady, unflinching. A leader who'd walked through fire and made sure everyone else walked out. Then the screen faded to black. When those in power choose to erase the truth to protect themselves, how many more shadows will it take before we finally demand the light? If this story moved you, hit that like button and subscribe for more powerful stories of courage, accountability, and the fight for justice.